Upon getting into Fujifilm, I've been exploring all of the settings, and one of the settings I was most interested in trying out was the built-in HDR mode. This HDR mode takes 3 photos, merges them together, and doesn't only create a JPEG, a finally processed, JPEG, but also creates a raw photo with those 3 images all in one file. That was very interesting to me. Today, though, I'm going to go over how to use the HDR setting and kind of really focus on the results to see if it was worth it for me to use and if maybe you should look at using it for your own photos, whether it's, landscapes or maybe real estate photography. So in case you don't know, to access the HDR setting on the camera, just switch the left dial to HDR. From there, you will have to adjust some settings. So if you go into the menu and then go into the shooting settings section and then drive settings, you'll find the HDR mode and there are 5 options. Auto lets the camera decide what mode to select. And then there is 200%, 400%, 800%, and 800% plus. Now, with all these modes, what are the differences and what do they look like? Well, let's take some photos and jump to the computer and take a look at them. So in front of us are the first set of photos taken. This is the single exposed raw image. And if we look at this image compared to the HDR raw, there isn't really much of a difference, if anything. This is the HDR 200% raw. The 200% versus 400%, I don't really see much of a difference. 400 to 800, I don't see a difference. 800 to 800 plus, again, no real difference. And that's because these raw images are all virtually the same. They're technically different, but it's really just showing what the camera thinks is the proper exposed raw image. It's not showing the fact that it took multiple exposed images and merged them together because it's not doing that processing in the raw. But if we compare the JPEGs, it will get a little different. Looking at the single exposed JPEG, obviously it's looking very similar, but let's jump to the 200% JPEG. You will notice there is a slight crop in, but really the single exposed versus 200% HDR, not too much of a difference. Now, 200% to 400% HDR, we are starting to see a difference, although maybe it's not noticeable right away. If we zoom into the window here and we go back and forth, we actually are seeing more detail in the image, in the highlights specifically. You can start to see the tree branches outside as well as the frame of the window. Now, if we go from 400% to 800%, you actually see even more. And now we can even see some of the power lines. Zooming out though, just kind of comparing the two, besides that highlight, we're actually not seeing that big of a difference in any of the shadows. If we look at the shadows over here and jump back and forth, there isn't much of a difference. The camera is doing its processing, but it's determining that this is fine and it's just doing work with the highlights. Now this is with 800 right here, but 800 plus is very different. Jumping to that, we now see a major lift in the shadows, but it also removed a lot of contrast and almost to the point that it's unnatural. So this is definitely a bit of a stylistic preference or a stylistic choice, and pending what your end vision is, this may or may not really be acceptable to you. But I don't want to compare just one photo, so let's jump to actually our second set of photos, which is the same location, but I turned on the lights in the room. So let's focus just on the JPEGs. So this is the single exposed JPEG, and jumping to the HDR 200, again, we're not really seeing much of a difference, but 200 to 400, again, we're seeing a slight difference in the highlights, really just up here. If we look at the lights, there's a tiny bit of a difference, ever so slightly in the light bulb. And then same thing with this window here. Now, if we go from 400 to 800, we even start to see just a hair bit of color from the blue sky outside, although it is kind of overcast. And we also see, again, a little bit of a difference between the light bulbs in 400 and 800, even 800 to going back down to 200. Again, we see a little bit of a difference. Now, going to 800 plus, again, we're seeing this very washed out, muddy image. And this is actually a little disappointing. I wasn't really expecting this because this bookcase here, this is a white bookcase, but it looks muddy. It looks gray in this image, which I didn't really expect to happen. At least in, 800, you can kind of see that this is white. You really don't know if that's the case, though, in this 800 plus. But I'm sure you're interested in seeing a completely different scene. So let's go to a completely different studio here. Again, we're going to focus just on the JPEGs as that is what's being processed. So we have the single exposed image here and going to 200. Again, that crop in, but not too big of a difference, although I am noticing a bit of a difference in the highlights between the two. We definitely are seeing a little bit more of the tree line. Going from, though, 200 to 400, we're seeing even more from the outside. But besides that, we're not seeing much else different in the shadows or anything. Now going from the 400 to 800, again, more in the highlights, and then 800, 800 plus, we get this very, washed out image, which is just going to need some additional work to kind of clean up, to make look more natural. But that's somewhat bypassing the reason why you would get an HDR image. Now, I do want to completely change gears and look at photos taken from outside. So I just went to the window and took some photos. And this is our single exposed image here. This is the 200. Now we're at 400. And, compared to like the single exposed image, we see a little bit more details in the highlights, in the clouds. But this is all, the same issue that we've had is once we go to 800 plus, we just get a very lack of contrasted photo, which looks unnatural. So those are the photo demos that I took for this video. I have tried to use the HDR mode on this camera many times throughout the couple months I've had this camera, and overall the results haven't been what I wanted, at least for me and real estate photography. Maybe for certain scenarios outside with certain subjects, HDR 800, 800 plus would work for you. For me, though, it's not giving me the results that I expected. And I'm going to be looking for kind of some different workflows, different options, or maybe just kind of sticking with the standard bracketed photos, which I could do a video of if you want on how to do that. It's really simple, though. Now, even though the JPEGs weren't really what I was looking for, I do want to actually circle back to the raw images because they're very interesting. But I kind of also hit a roadblock, and I'm wondering if anyone else has seen a difference here. So when you bring the raw image, the Fujifilm HDR raw image into Lightroom or a similar raw program, it's not utilizing the raw files that are intertwined in this massive raw image because there's 3 photos combined in one raw, but it's only showing the main, properly exposed raw. I don't understand why programs can't utilize it. You technically can convert that raw into a DNG in Photoshop or Lightroom, but that doesn't seem to do anything. Now, I was able to download the Fujifilm Raw Studio app from Fujifilm themselves, and their app does let you view, the raw file in a, processed manner, but that doesn't seem to really help me. I don't have the ability to edit it. I don't really see the point. There is a tool online, and I'll have a link in the description for this tool, but someone made a tool to extract the raw images, and you can just download them and then combine them, with a different program like Lightroom, or manually blend everything in Photoshop. That's cool, but at that point, why not just take a properly bracketed image? I don't know. Fujifilm's done some wacky things. I don't fully understand it. I'd like to understand it more. And I kind of want to make this video to show you what I knew, but also to see if you had any assistance, any help, because maybe there's something I'm missing, but I don't think so. Not right now, not that I've seen online. So anyway, I hope you liked this video. I hope this helped you a little bit with, raw images on Fujifilm, what they do, what they kind of don't do. And maybe it's beneficial for you. For me, unfortunately, at least in the professional setting that I use this camera in, I'm going to stick with bracketed images and properly edit them in, software. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Hey, thanks again for watching. This video was shot at our studio in North Jersey. If you're visiting the area or you live in the area and you need a photo or video studio, check us out. Our studio has a ton of backdrops as well as equipment such as lighting and also other props to make your photo shoot or video shoot a success. Just check out the link in the description. All right, thanks again.